This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome to another show. We have something different and unique for you. A comic juggler. If you've ever been to Pier 39, you've probably seen his act. But ladies and gentlemen, a really good old friend and a regular at Laughs Unlimited, it's Fred Anderson.
They're applauding for me.
Hey, Fred, it's so good to connect with you again. How you doing, buddy?
Pretty good. My plan for the next year is to work on card magic.
There you go. So you have been doing comedy magic for a number of decades. How would you remember starting off with working at Laughs Unlimited?
Let's see. So I started out in the 70s doing street performing at the Renaissance Fair, and I had a partner. His name was Kit Trueblood, and he decided to quit and get a real job.
Not a real job.
A real job. Sad. Real job in about 1985. So in about 1985, 86, I said, oh, what am I going to do? And, comedy clubs were starting to get really hot. I mean, there was the Punchline in San Francisco, the Holy City Zoo, the other cafe. And, just basically you're going, where can I work?
Laughs Unlimited.
And you guys came up on my radar, and I sent you a videotape, and you tried me out, and the rest is history. I think the first time I worked for you was probably 1985 or 1986.
Well, it turned into a good, strong professional relationship because I remember you working the club many, many times, and we've stayed friends. In fact, when I opened up my business in Elk Grove a few years ago, you came up and entertained the crowd as part of the grand opening. So we're still getting a chance to work together occasionally, but that only goes back to the fact that you're a pure, clean, funny, good quality juggler. You do it all.
I try.
When you were working the streets, did you find that hard or easy? How did that go?
The street, sort of like the slight difference between the street and the stage. Well, the big difference is with the street, you have to engage people as they're going by and convince them to watch you. And, you keep them entertained, and then you ask for tips, and then they go on their way. So with the street performing compared to the club, there's a lot more sort of cheerleading involved in the street perforing.
Sure, in the club, you've got a captive audience, right? Yeah.
One of the challenges that I had going into the clubs was, I tended to yell too much because, you're when you're in a festival or on the street, you're there's people, 50 feet away, and you're, hey, everybody, look at me. And in the club, you just got the microphone, and you just tell them about your intimate thoughts. And so that's a huge challenge going from one to the other. And you have to keep reminding yourself when you're doing a club to go, you don't need to go, hey, everybody, you want to see this, make some noise. If you make a lot of noise, more people will come and it'll be better. You don't need to do that in a club.
Oh, that's interesting. But I know that Penn and Teller and Larry Wilson was interviewed earlier, mentioned that he did a lot of Renaissance fairs.
Renaissance Fair, yeah. That's actually where we started, me and my partner, Kit. We started at the Renaissance Fair in Novato, up in Marin County. That was 75. That was 75, 76. And right at that time, Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco was making a transition from being a fish canning and, actual
industrial
ship docking and unloading stuff to a tourist area.
Wow. I wonder if we crossed paths because right out of high school, Renaissance fairs were very popular, and my friends and I went to several in the Novato area, and we all dressed up at different things. But it was really funny because, well, I don't know, funny, but for me, it was memorable because I would dress up as some urchin and I would sit on the ground in the mud and just cover myself with crap. And I'd stand there and go, "Pebbles, extremely small rocks for sale."
You were one of the mud beggars. Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was, we had a hoot out of it. It was great. You know, it was just something you could do with the girls, and it was a group event, and being in high school and just out of high school.
Cleavage City.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was definitely Renaissance fairs. I know they're still happening, but I don't think there's the fervor there was in the 70s.
No, not as much. I mean, they're kind of big business now. I mean, there's about maybe a dozen of them, and there's like 2 or 3 companies that control several of them. And I have, a bunch of friends that work, and they're doing really well.
Good.
The thing that held me back from going whole hog into that was the time constraint. So you're working like Friday and Saturday, and you've got the whole week off, and you're just putzing around.
Right.
And, a lot of the people, the fair circuit, they're hippies and they smoke pot, and that's fine. I would go crazy.
So once you got into the clubs and then you ended up working at Laughs Unlimited, in that 1985 range, we had moved into the new club on Firehouse Alley. And you and I talked about this before I turned on the recording, but that was interesting for jugglers because I like bringing in variety acts, and jugglers like yourself were one of those types that I enjoyed a lot. But we had about a 7-foot ceiling. I mean, a really low ceiling.
So, I mean, you can't be juggling fire or like, I don't know if you had guys that did the thing where you get on top of a tall unicycle and do that.
No,
stuff like that would be kind of awkward. So, yes, I mean, part of the reason that I started working on other stuff, a straitjacket escape and, the magic and other things was I was, constrained by the physical space of the club.
We should probably mention to the audience that I think of you as a juggler because that's how we were introduced and that's how I booked you for many years.
Yeah, that's how I started, yeah.
Yeah, but you did transition into magic and escapes and pretty much anything that would entertain a crowd, and I think that helped extend your career in entertainment. Being versatile and having a lot of different talents certainly adds to the variety that you can bring to a show depending on the time and the location and, like you said, the stage setting. While working Laughs, did you have any memorable stories or situations? Anything you remember fondly?
Yes. Okay, I missed the boat in not hanging out because when you had on the Firehouse Alley, you had the club downstairs and you had the bar upstairs with the magic theme.
The Magic Hat Bar, that's right.
Yeah, the Magic Hat Bar. And now that, I'm a little older and, slightly wiser, if I had actually made friends with those magicians upstairs, I would be like 10 times better. Do you remember Ken Garr?
Oh, yeah. I talk to Ken still occasionally and have used him in some of the fundraisers I still book.
Yeah. So, so he was doing that. I was doing the stuff downstairs. And, a couple of times we worked together and he'd do stuff. And I'm being like Mr. Arrogant, 30-something dude going, yeah, it's funny stuff with the cards, but can he juggle knives? And now that I'm learning magic, he does a thing where he basically hands out like 10 cards in a row to the audience and shuffles them into the deck, and he finds every single damn card. And,
right.
Now that I know how you actually do that, I'm just like going, God damn it, that's hard.
Yeah, he's a really good magician, and I think it's interesting, and you're kind of bringing it up, but there was a little bit of a competitive nature. Comics are usually pretty supportive of the comics, but in the variety acts, for some reason, singers versus magicians versus jugglers versus ventriloquists, there always seemed to be a little bit of a competitive edge, and I'm not sure if it's a truism or not, but I have experienced that.
I think possibly it's all because we were young and stupid. And in the comedy clubs, the thing that we were working against was, this is a stand-up comedy club, and occasionally we'll do like, one act that'll do something else. So, it was entirely possible to, call up a club booker and say, yeah, I did this really funny juggling act, and they'll say, yeah, we had a juggling act, last year. That's all we need.
Yeah,
for a weekend.
I've explained before to my listeners that I was more of a fan of the variety style acts, and I made a point, especially in the early years, to almost every week have some sort of variety. But I really was different. Yeah, no, that was really different because the gestalt, as it were, was, an angry guy smoking a cigarette with his drink on a stool in front of a brick wall, complaining about his ex-girlfriend. Right. You're talking about stand-up comedy in its purest form.
Yeah, in its purest form.
Well, and that comes across differently. And you're right about the feel of maybe having to work a little harder because the audiences are there for stand-up. And so when I would introduce a comic or a magician, and not all were comedic variety acts. So in many cases, they were straight. There was a couple, especially when it came to magic, there was a few acts I booked that there wasn't a joke in the bit. But if there were good magicians, the audience was there to be entertained and they appreciated it.
Yeah, they get to do the ooh-ah thing.
Right.
Yeah, that is that I've seen like gone to actual shows where the audience either respects the act on stage or not, depending on what they were expecting before. I saw a juggler named Chris Bliss open for a rock band, and he was trying to learn stand-up at that time. And so, he would do this like badass juggling to rock music, very sort of psychedelic, quadrophenia-ish. The audience would be just cheering. He'd walk over to the side of the stage, start doing some jokes, and like in 30 seconds, the audience says, "Fuck you, get off the stage." And then, he'd cue the music. And by the time he got back to the middle of the stage to do his stuff, the audience would go, "We hate you. Wait, what? Ooh, I know this song. I like this song. We like you." And it went back and forth like a seesaw. It was crazy.
Yeah, I hadn't experienced that.
And I also saw the same thing happen the other way. I saw a mandolin player open for Robin Williams. The mandolin player would sort of go back and forth between telling, sort of like personal stories and basically talking and playing his music. And the audience flipped. I mean, they didn't yell at him, but the audience flipped back and forth between listening to him and talking to the people at their table, depending on what he was doing. It's sort of like, mandolin playing, yeah, whatever. Hey, where do you want to go after the show? Right. And then he stopped the song and then, ended the song and they said, yeah, let me tell you about, I was traveling through Nebraska and I met, he's talking now. We have to stop and listen.
Well, I think that goes with the types of entertainment, that music is something that people are accustomed to having as background to conversations and other situations where if someone's doing spoken word, we've been taught as children, shut up and listen. And it doesn't always work that way, hecklers, but that's generally true. And I think it is kind of based on how we're raised. Now, you did the Renaissance fairs and then you hit a few clubs. At what point did you become one of the standard bearers at Pier 39? And we should tell everybody that, Fred, tell them, but it was for several years.
Pier 39 opened in 1978, and there were maybe like 3 or 4, there's maybe half a dozen juggling acts that worked the other pitches, and we all started kind of working there together. So I've been there. There's like 3 of us that are still working there that have been there since the place opened.
Oh, so you still doing some stage work at Pier 39?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. My last show there was on, I think, the 15th before the curtain came down on Stay in Place.
So all those years and all those crowds, what would you say between a stage show and a Renaissance fair? What's it like? And it's very similar to street performing, but there is a stage.
Yeah. I mean, so at Pier 39, there's a stage. And they got like seating for about 50. And, standing room for, close to 800.
Yeah, it's huge. We've been by several times to see you perform, but I knew that you did it years upon years, very successful there. Does that pay much?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
It's like, if you get you get a bunch of people, maybe 10% of them give you something, and that adds up.
Oh, I thought you got paid from the pier.
No, it's all on tips.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you were part of the program.
Yeah. No. Well, I am part of the program, but it's all on tips. So it's kind of like being a waiter. It's sort of like, it's like you don't get paid much for being a waiter, but if you're in a nice restaurant on, Saturday night, lots of people are buying, like Chianti and the steak dinner, so they're going to tip you accordingly.
Wow, that's interesting. It would seem to be, for somebody like me, a difficult way to make a living, but you obviously made it work for all those years. And weren't you doing, give the audience a sense of what it's like working a venue like that, hours-wise and time-wise?
Say that again, what?
Well, I'm sorry, maybe I'm being too vague. So in a comedy club, you would go up on stage and you would do 20 to 40 minutes, depending on where you were in the show. And it happened once a night, maybe on the weekends, twice a night. But what was it like? What's the schedule when you're working Pier 39?
They've got a schedule. There's about 20 different people that used to work there. So you would get like a time slot that would have like 2 shows or 3 shows. So, the people that work there regularly would work there about 3 or 4 days a week, a couple of shows each time. So about, 6 to 10 shows.
Well, that's
somewhere between 6 and 10 performances a week.
So that's pretty consistent work, and not enough to really, wear you down and take advantage of you, but enough to make a living. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And there's really nothing like Pier 39, at least in Northern California, where it's an open air, free entertainment, free location, and as you said, you're only working for tips. I think maybe Venice Beach in LA,
Santa Cruz. I mean, there's that boardwalk in Santa Cruz. They don't have they have acts, but they don't have them pass the hat. It's like a paid program. And right. I think I forget whether they have a stage or just an area kind of in the middle of everything.
No, there's a stage that's actually just off the boardwalk on the beach, and that's why it when they have a band or entertainment there, it's a paid set, and that's why I thought you got paid. And then down at Venice Beach, though, it's all street entertainment.
It's all street entertainment. It's all past the hat, yeah.
But no stage. So Pier 39 is pretty unique.
Yeah, Pier 39, well, it's sort of unique. I mean, it's unique in that it's got a stage and seating. Most of the other sort of busking shopping malls have just like open areas. On the East Coast, there's Faneuil Hall, which is like a historic redevelopment zone, and that's just like a giant sort of cobblestone plaza.
Oh, interesting.
The same sort of thing in Covent Garden in London. Basically, they have various like cobblestone plazas for people to perform in.
Well, I'm glad there's somewhere for people to cut their teeth with the public and variety entertainment. Oh yeah, no, it's one of those things that's kind of like almost like a secret undergroundy thing because it's live entertainment that's not official. So like in a comedy club, you're trying to get people to buy tickets at the door, so you buy ads in the newspaper. You do a Facebook ad now, and you try and get the word out officially with advertising. So you're constantly telling the world that you exist. Whereas in a street performing venue, unless it's a festival or something, it's just sort of we got these guys here on Saturday. Right, and the so-called audience, which they really aren't, are basically shoppers and tourists cruising by, and some stop and enjoy the entertainment and some don't. Yeah.
But just like your venue in Old Sacramento, it's part of the whole like experience. What was the name of the Italian restaurant that you had there?
Art of Pasta?
Art of Pasta, yeah. So there's lots of Italian restaurants, in Sacramento, but there aren't that many that are in a historic district with a boardwalk and a magic bar down the street.
Right.
So it's this whole sort of experience where you go to that area, you wander around, you go, oh, let me look at the cool candle shop. Hey, let's have dinner here. Hey, there's this cool bar with the dueling pianos, and it's like an entertainment district. And so people they're not specifically going there to buy a candle. They're going there to to just sort of goof off.
It's like the exploration and discovery of different forms of, eateries, entertainment, and shopping, but there generally is not a planned point A to point B. It's we're wandering around and, ooh, look what we discovered.
Yeah. I mean, the industry is called festival marketplace.
Oh, really? Oh, come on. Sure, of course there's a name for it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what like Pier 39 and Faneuil Hall and Harbor Place in Baltimore and the South Street Seaport in, I don't even know if the Seaport's still there, in New York City is a street performing thing kind of like Pier 39.
Okay.
And it's down, like all the way down at the bottom of the island on the waterfront on the opposite side from where World Trade Center is. So
right.
So instead of on the Jersey side, it's on the Brooklyn side.
Interesting.
And I got booked at Caesars in Atlantic City with, I think it was Dennis Wolfberg.
Oh, wow. He's amazingly funny, or was.
And we worked, we worked like the week, and we had the weekends off because they had like the major sort of headliner music people on the weekends. And so what they would do is they would basically give us a ride in a limo to wherever we wanted to go, either Philly or New York. And it was, I think it was like Washington's birthday weekend. It was in February. And for some odd reason, it was a heat wave that spring. And I called up the South Street Seaport to see if I could do shows there. Told them that I worked at Pier 39. I forget what I told them, if I maybe like auditioned before or something. But I got to do spots there. And because it was a heat wave, there were like scads of people out there. I made bank. I think I made more doing those street shows than I got paid at Caesars.
Wow.
And
good job.
At the end of my last show on Sunday, I got picked up in a limo, curbside, to go back to Atlantic City.
Man, that makes you feel like a king, doesn't it?
Yeah, that was nuts.
Oh, that's great. And working with Dennis must have been fun too. Hey, real quick.
He was good.
All those,
I miss him.
Yeah, me too. All those years on the boardwalk, there must have been a couple bizarre things that happened. I don't know if you've seen celebrities or people doing strange things. I mean, a normal tourist will notice the most bizarre things on Pier 39, but being on stage, do you have a couple memories of anything a little out of the ordinary or memorable?
I never actually interacted with any celebrities at the pier. I mean, more in comedy clubs, because you know what, you're hanging out in the, like, especially if you're like the opener or the middle, you're hanging out in the back room and you're like, oh my God, that's Dennis Miller. It's like,
right.
Oh my God, the first time I worked at the Improv in LA, Jay Leno, Jerry Seinfeld, and Roseanne Barr just stopped in to do guest sets that night. I mean, you're like, you're doing the clubs, at a certain time. It was, you're hanging out and you're going, fuck, this is a scene.
Yeah, you're in the business.
So that was pretty amazing.
Called show.
With the streets, I mean, at Pier 39, at one point I was doing like a bit where, talking about how dangerous something was. And I had a Barney the dinosaur doll. And I'd made one where I could, I cut it in half and sewed it together and Velcroed it together so I could cut the head off with a.
I remember that bit actually.
Yeah. So I was doing that. And then, a guy from the balcony started shouting, "Hey, why don't you light it on fire?" And yeah, whatever. Yeah. And then if you pay me, hey, and then, why don't you light it on fire? And then $20 bills started raining down from the balcony. Basically, I mean, hey, why don't you light it on fire? And you're like, $20 bill.
Really?
I keep going. $20 bill. So, I think, I didn't have enough guts to see how far I took it. So I basically, when the guy threw down $100, five $20 bills, I said, okay. And I, dipped the thing in gasoline and, juggled a Barney doll on fire.
Was he happy?
Because that first stuff melts and I burned my hand.
Oh,
but it was damn funny.
I bet it was, and he paid $100 and got what he wanted, but a kind of a bizarre request. I mean, I've heard of people not liking Barney, but that's taking it to the next level.
Well, it's just he's going with the fun of the moment, because I was like, juggling knives, cutting the head off the Barney doll. I think it was like a Saturday night, and people were loosey-goosey.
Wow, that's a great story. Now, you had several years at Laughs Unlimited. Did you get to work with any people that you could name drop, or people that you really impressed you comedically?
There were a few people that, the cool thing about working in a comedy club situation is it's interactive between, the performer and the audience. And there were just some people had this thing where it was just like a conversation and a love fest. And they could do like weird shit, and the people would just like go with them. Paula Poundstone would do a thing where she'd lie on her back and stick her feet up on a chair and do like a puppet show with her shoes.
Yeah, I remember that. She was a little strange.
And she would tag it with, there's not a lot of rules about stand-up comedy. I'm pretty sure standing up is one of them.
That's a great line.
Just beautiful stuff like that. And do you remember Chris Alpine?
Yes.
He would do a thing where he would talk about arguing with his wife, and then she would stop him just like cold, like a car, screeching to a halt, saying, I'm right because I'm a woman. And then you would see him dither around the stage with coming up with a potential argument, like focusing on coming up to, and then he'd say, "You got me. You're right." And then he would continue it by saying, and then she would start going, and he'd look all terrified, and okay, you're always right. And terrified, and your mother's always right too. And when he did that bit, you could see every single woman in the audience punch her guy in the arm and shake her finger in their face and say, "And don't you forget it."
Well, that's a great bit to remember. Well, I was.
And do you remember Wayne Doba, the goofy tap dancer?
Yes, that's his name. I've already talked about him. He was one of the most bizarre acts that I booked that I really felt proud of, because how many comedy clubs would book a professional tap dancer that wasn't even particularly funny, but he was an amazing tap dancer. I didn't remember the name.
Comic before they had alternative comedy.
Wayne Dobug. Thank you for reminding me. Did I get him through you?
Yeah. We did a thing called the Magic Circus. Me.
That's right.
And Paul Nathan. Yeah. And John Gilkey, who ended up being a star in Cirque du Soleil.
Wow.
But Wayne did this thing that it's beautiful. He would do like a sort of an extended disco dance bit. He would go into the audience and dance in the aisle. And so this was like in the sort of 90s, early 90s. He'd dance in the aisle to this disco dance music, Bee Gees and all that. He would pull a woman up out of the audience, and he would always pick somebody in their 40s. He would pull a woman up out of the audience and do some disco dance moves. So if a woman's in her 40s, she's old enough that she actually probably went to discos and danced to Bee Gees when she was in her 20s.
Exactly.
And the look, it was amazing. When he did this, the look on their faces every time was a mixture of terror and joy. And the audience cheered.
Oh, just
amazing.
Genius. Just genius. Well, I was just talking to Larry Wilson, who was on an earlier podcast. He was here in the studio. And I was telling him about this amazing tap dancer that climbed up on top of a bar stool, the one we always had on stage, the wooden one, and did this whole tap routine on top of this wooden stool. It was just magical. I mean, I don't know if the audience enjoyed it as much as me, but it was very entertaining, and he was really talented. And thanks for reminding me that the show and his name, because that was a very cool experience for me.
Yeah, he ended up working with kind of like an offshoot, sort of a similar thing to Cirque du Soleil. He worked with a thing called Teatro Zinzani. They're based in Seattle, and for a while they had like a tent show in San Francisco, and it was like a dinner theater.
I think
circuit.
I remember that. Yeah, so he had some success because I don't think he got a lot of work in comedy clubs, but I think it's great that you brought him up and we were able to experience that. So thank you for that. Going back to your Laughs days now, you mentioned a few people you've worked with and comics that you've had experiences with, like Dennis Wolfberg. I sold the club in 2001, and it sounds like you stayed on at Pier 39. Were there other experiences in the last 20 years that kind of guided your career path?
Well, like in the 2000s, I would go every year to the Fringe Theatre Festival in Edinburgh, Scotland.
Oh, how
And this is like a big sort of arts festival. Well, okay, so in like I think about 97, 98, I got a sort of a recurring job with Carnival Cruise Line. So I was doing the best cruise ship job in the world. I would fly, and it sort of settled out after a few years too. I'd fly to Puerto Vallarta on Wednesday, get on the ship, do a show that night in the big theater, like 1,000 seats, and then fly home the next day from the next stop. And so I did that. So basically I'm working, like a big theater, and it's kind of like headliner money in a comedy club, but I'm only working one night a week. So that was pretty cool.
A great gig.
And a lot of frequent flyer miles. And I used that to travel. I went to this Scotland festival, and I produced a bunch of shows and took other people over there. So I did that from about 2000 until 2010.
Wow, 10 years of going to Scotland and doing that would be amazing. What a great experience.
It was incredible. It's if anybody's listening, you fucking got to go. It's extraordinary. I mean, I'm not kidding. The years that I was there, they had over 2,000 different shows every single day. That's
incredible. Well, that's cool,
so
friend.
Kind of like, do you remember when you produced me? I think we did a thing called the Shtickmeisters. I think it was me and Howie Nave and Doba and maybe Suzanne Ramsey. We did it during that sort of the Sawdust Festival.
No, you're thinking of the Jazz Festival in Old Sacramento. In the early days, there was these. Maybe it wasn't the Jazz Festival. It might have been the Gold Rush days. I think it was the Gold Rush days.
Where they actually put dirt down over the entire area, and it looked like 1865.
Only wagons and horses were allowed, and there was fake gunfights. And Old Sacramento, being a tourist area, would have these different festivals. Jazz Festival was one. Gold Rush Days was another that we're talking about now. Shtickmasters was a show that we produced to try to get these people that are there to be entertained by the 1800s. They had gold panning and campfires, all this stuff. And we're like, okay, we're a comedy club. How are we going to make our show fit into this festival?
Yeah, the 1860s, yeah.
Right, and I dressed up as a sheriff and walked around in my cowboy boots. We did this show to kind of an old-timey vaudeville show to try to kind of fit into the theme. Great memory, Fred. I forgot all about that.
Oh, I've been working like all night to write notes down.
It was a lot of fun though, and I think the audiences really appreciated it.
Yeah,
and it was a way for us to not only create some income during a festival that we weren't really a part of, but also to bring a different kind of entertainment to the club.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Good memory.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
And
the
reason I mentioned that is when they did that in Old Sacramento, basically every business tried to do something that would be sort of entertaining or enticing people to come in. And the Fringe was just basically like that too, where during this festival, everybody that had like a nook and cranny in their store that they could set up a stage and like 20 or 30 chairs would rent it out to people to do shows.
Interesting. Well,
yeah. So, I mean, you do shows in like church basements, like a graveyard. Somebody did a show in a graveyard. a guy did a show where he built like an elevator, like an elevator enclosure in the courtyard of one of the theaters, and the show is basically like you get in this elevator and it's like this couple arguing, and it's like the half an hour of I love you.
Right. Oh, that's funny.
Why'd you sleep with my sister?
Well, thanks for sharing those stories. And Fred, it's really great to have you on the podcast and talk about some of the stuff that you experienced from Pier 39 to Laughs Unlimited and on to Scotland. So you've had a world of experiences.
Shout out to one more thing.
Yo, sure.
So, Andy Gross. Remember Andy?
Yes, we were. He told you to give me a call. Andy and I did an interview just the other day.
The thing is, you never know when the person you meet this year is going to call you back 10 years later. So we worked the clubs, and I didn't really know him all that much, because we didn't usually work the same night, because we kind of did, comedy magic, comedy juggling. We didn't work that often together. But in about 2010, he gave me a call and said, "Hey, I'm starting to do shows in theaters. I need a wacky sidekick." And so we did 5 years of touring where we would go to these historic, beautiful theaters in these different towns and do a performing arts kind of show. It was great. And he did, he would do, comedy, the comedy magic. He was also a really good ventriloquist, and he brought magic illusions and hired a woman assistant. So it was like an illusion show with the wacky comedy juggler as the MC.
Oh,
and
cool.
we did some.
He said he had a lot of fun with those.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. It was thrilling.
That sounds like a great way to again expand the various aspects of your talent and have all these variety of type shows. I mean, really, Fred, you've done it all from cruise ships to comedy clubs to street performing to huge festivals and even Renaissance fairs. I mean, really, juggling does lend itself to almost every situation because it's a talent that everybody appreciates. You have to practice the heck out of to get any good at. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, what
I've been lucky.
Yes,
I've been lucky.
Well, we're very excited that you had a chance to work with us. Thank you for doing this podcast. What I'm going to do is I always have a little bit of stand-up on every show, and I have a set here from Dennis Wolfberg, and you had the privilege of working with him, a terrific stand-up comic, and I'm going to put that on as we finish. But Fred, thanks so much for doing this. We appreciate you being a comic juggler that we could count on year after year, and for all your time working for Laughs Unlimited and me, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We have a great comedy sub coming up right now with Dennis Wolfberg.
Last week, I'm not making this up, I played an old age home in Columbia, South Carolina. You want to talk old? I had a woman in my audience celebrating her 102nd birthday. In fact, at the end of the show, they brought in a cake to celebrate this event, but in a stroke of incredible misjudgment, they gave her these candles that you could not blow out. A brilliant gag for a woman who had no concept of reality and blowing her brains up and spitting all over the cake. It was disgusting. And then she cut a slice and asked if I would like some. I said I'm trying to cut down on saliva in my diet. In fact, it's not cake now, it's pudding, thanks to you. 102, what would you buy a woman 102? 50 is gold, 75 is diamond, 102 is oxygen, something that'll help her breathe. And this is a comedy show. She didn't laugh at anything, I said. And I said something to her I thought was so funny. I said, 102, I'll bet there's no peer pressure. That's comedy. I've not always been a comedian. I was a school teacher for 12 years here in New York City. A job that I began with great enthusiasm, a fervor, give me the children, I'll save the world. But after a couple of months, I began to fantasize about force-feeding them asbestos because they drive me nuts. I taught 6th grade in part of New York called the South Bronx, a neighborhood that socioeconomically ranks under Calcutta, to give you an idea. People from India would say South Bronx, what a hellhole. And I taught in a school that even by South Bronx standards was a difficult one. Any elementary school that has its own coroner. It's unusual. Reading was my main responsibility, 6th grade. And I say reading, my kids had difficulty remembering my name, which is Wolfberg. You wouldn't think all that tough. And the kids call me Wolfman and Wolfgang. I had a kid first day of school one year call me Wolf Butt. He said, "Hey, Wolf Butt, we got homework tonight." And I said, "The name is not Wolf Butt, it's Wolfberg, and what's more, it is Mr. Wolfberg." And the kid said, "How am I supposed to know you married?" Then they gave me the slow class for 6 consecutive years. Not special, just slow. I used to think of them as stationary, motionless. They grouped them according to intelligence tests, and the whole concept of intelligence testing always amused me because at the low end of the intelligence spectrum, where I taught, they had categories they were called, in order, I'm not making these words up, they're called a moron, imbecile, and idiot. This amused me because conceivably you could have an imbecile who was working very hard to become a moron. I could imagine a kid running home one day saying, "I'm a moron! That's how we knew you could do it!" 6 consecutive years. I had them all. I had a kid, Frank Daly. These are true kids. First day of school, we fill out standard roll book information. So I said, "Frank, tell me your birthday." He says, "March the 21st. I said, "What year?" He says, "Every year." Truancy. My kids were truant beyond all human imagination, and they come in with the most brazen excuses. I taught 6th grade. I had a kid who missed 2 days and told me he'd had a stroke. I congratulated him on a remarkable recovery. To be back in school 2 days after a stroke is an unbelievable commitment to education. I had one kid who missed 3 weeks and told me he'd been on jury duty. Can you believe it? They assume you believe anything they tell you. And when I said I would teach them at the 6th grade level, I would teach them how to write what they call original research reports. And I say original research despite the fact in 12 years, I never got anything handed in that even remotely qualified as original research. You give them a subject, they go to the nearest encyclopedia and they become stenographers. and they hand this in assuming you cannot detect blatant plagiarism. I had a kid, James Drucker, hands in a report on the country Peru that began with a sentence. Get this. Peru is epistemologically, 6th grade, attempting to deal with the long-range effects of a protracted economic depression. I say to myself, might this be copied? Who's to say? This kid don't talk about put a pen in his hand. He's another Hemingway. What a metamorphosis. I had never seen a transformation like this. The kid was functionally subliterate and comes into my class as a transfer student from a prison release program. What a delight. Having stabbed his last teacher, a joy to have him on my right. With a note from the guidance counselor that said James is socially disadvantaged, which in the South Bronx is a euphemism for criminally insane. Socially disadvantaged, 6th grade, show and tell he brought in a subpoena. And the guidance counselor said you must gear the curriculum to meet his needs. I figured I'll teach him plea bargaining. This will certainly be helpful. Gear the curriculum. I'll teach him how to write a good ransom note. This will certainly come in handy. If you ever want to see your son alive again, comma. Thank you very much.
Hey, that was Dennis Wolfberg, a early set from 1987 by him. You may have noticed that he talks a lot about being a school teacher. He was an actual high school teacher in the Bronx for over 12 years, and obviously a lot of his material came from those experiences. He went on to do some television. In 1989, he was in Quantum Leap, and in 1990, he was in the show Teacher, Teacher. Sadly, we did lose Dennis to melanoma in 1994, but he'll always be remembered as one of the funniest guys in America. And in fact, in 1990, he was chosen as America's Comedy Award Best Male Performer. So Dennis Wolfberg had a great career. We were lucky enough to have him several times at our club, and it was great to hear his set today. So we want to thank Fred Anderson and a set by Dennis Wolfberg for being in today's broadcast. Hey, we hope you're enjoying this series of podcasts. Be sure to continue to listen, rate, and share. And if you get a chance, subscribe to future podcasts. We do release a new one every Sunday. So thanks for joining us for this week's show. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.